Hello and welcome. Today we are jumping into Isaiah chapter 54. And this chapter is amazing because it answers a huge question that's left hanging by one of the most famous passages in the entire Bible. I mean, think about it, right? In any great story, after the hero makes that ultimate sacrifice, we're always left wondering, okay, so what was it all for? What happens to the people who were just saved? Well, Isaiah 53 gives us that powerful, unforgettable story of the suffering servant. Isaiah 54, well, that's the what happens next.
And here's what's so crucial to get. Chapter 54 isn't just the next chapter. According to our source material, it's the direct result, the glorious consequence of everything the servant did. It spells out all the incredible benefits for his followers.
Now, to really unlock this chapter, we're going to do something a little unconventional. We're actually going to jump all the way to the very last sentence first. The source we're looking at suggests that this final line is the key. It's the interpretive lens for everything that comes before it. And there it is. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. The whole chapter, all these wild, incredible promises we're about to look at, they're all part of an inheritance. And it's an inheritance meant for a very specific group of people. So who gets this amazing heritage? Notice the word is plural, servants. Isaiah 53 was all about the singular servant, but chapter 54 is about his followers, the people who get all the benefits from what he did. And their right standing, their righteousness, it's not something they earned. The text says it comes directly from God, all because of the servant. Okay, so what's the first part of this inheritance? Well, it kicks off with a promise of growth so massive, so completely counterintuitive, it's honestly kind of hard to wrap your head around. The chapter opens up with this command to a woman who can't have children: sing. Now, why in the world would she sing? Because unbelievably, she's going to have more kids than the woman who's already married with a family. I mean, that sounds like a total paradox, right? How is that even possible? So this is where it gets really interesting. Our source material unpacks this metaphor for us. The married wife, that represents the nation of Israel, which historically had that special agreement, that covenant with God. But the barren woman, she represents the Gentile nations, basically everyone else, who are historically outside of that relationship. So the promise is that, because of the servant's work, there's going to be this explosive wave of people from all nations pouring into the family of God, even more than from the original covenant people. It's a game changer. And this imagery just perfectly illustrates the sheer scale of that growth. You get this picture of a tent that just can't hold everyone inside. You have to yank the stakes out, make the ropes longer, and just keep expanding in every single direction because the family is growing beyond all possible expectations. Okay, so let's move on to the second part of this heritage. After talking about this massive growth from the outside, the focus shifts back to the married wife, back to Israel. And this is a promise of deep, personal reconciliation and a love that just will not fail. The text doesn't shy away from a painful past. It acknowledges there was a time of judgment, a time that felt like being completely forsaken. But that tiny moment of wrath is just completely overwhelmed by what comes next. A promise of being gathered back, of being brought home with great mercies. The contrast between those two ideas is just so powerful. And here is the absolute peak of that promise. Think about the most permanent, unmovable thing you can imagine, a mountain. The promise here is that even if the mountains themselves could just get up and leave, God's kindness and his covenant of peace are even more permanent. They will never, ever be removed. And that leads us right into the third and final promise of this inheritance. This part combines those two big ideas of growth and permanence into one vision of a future that is both huge and absolutely secure. So the chapter gives us these two incredible architectural pictures. First, we had the tent, which is all about being on the move and having limitless room to grow. But now we get this image of a city that's literally built with precious jewels. And that is all about permanence, beauty, and unshakable stability. It's a promise of both growth and security. And just look at the details. This is not just any old city. Its very foundations are made of sapphires. Its gates are sparkling jewels. This isn't just some structure. It's a masterpiece. It signifies something of immense value, divine strength, and a beauty that lasts forever. And with that kind of permanence comes ultimate protection. This is probably one of the boldest promises in the whole chapter. no weapon, no accusation, nothing will ultimately succeed against God's people. And why is that? As our source points out, it's because God is sovereign even over his enemies. They can't do anything without his say-so, and he promises to protect his own. So let's just pull it all together. What is the heritage of the servants of the Lord? Well, it's these 3 incredible promises, and they all flow directly from the work of the servant back in chapter 53. First, you have explosive, totally unexpected growth. Second, an unfailing, unbreakable love. And third, absolute, divinely guaranteed security. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. These promises, they aren't just ancient history. They're described as a heritage, something that's passed down, something you receive. So the question for us then is, what does it mean to see yourself as an heir to this inheritance of growth, love, and security right here, right now?